This interview was not supposed to happen. The man sitting across from us requested no camera, no full name, no tribal affiliation listed in any publication. He allowed an audio recorder, a single notepad, and one condition, that we not contact the agency that hired him until after this account was published. We agreed. What he describes took place over 2 separate entries into a restricted wilderness corridor in the northern United States. The first entry was contracted, the second was not. He has not spoken publicly about either. For 4 years, this account existed only in a handwritten field journal, a 22-minute audio recording, and the memory of a man who has spent 3 decades reading landscapes that most people are not trained to see. He is not given to exaggeration. 2 colleagues who have worked alongside him in the field, one a former search and rescue coordinator, one a licensed wildlife biologist, reviewed the core details of this account before we recorded it. Both confirmed the events as consistent with what he reported to them privately. Neither agreed to be named. He does not describe what happens as an encounter. He describes it as a recognition. Something in that forest identified him, assessed him, and made a decision about him. He leans forward when he says the next part. His voice does not change. That is what makes it land. What I tracked in there was not something I had language for. Not in English, not in Lakota. Nothing I was trained to follow. He pauses. But it had language for me. Before the account, the man. Because what follows means nothing without understanding who is delivering it. He has worked in restricted wilderness zones for 31 years. His first contracted assignment was in 1993, a large mammal corridor survey along the Montana-Idaho border. Since then, he has logged fieldwork across 14 states, primarily in federally managed land with limited public access.
He holds a Level 3 rating through CyberTracker International, one of the most rigorous wildlife tracking certification systems in existence. Less than 200 people in North America hold that designation. For 11 of those 31 years, he worked directly as a contracted specialist for the U.S. Forest Service. His role: enter zones flagged for unusual animal activity, assess behavioral patterns, document findings, report through a specific internal channel. Not to the public, not to the press, through a channel. He is a member of the Standing Rock Sioux Nation. He was raised in North Dakota. He spent portions of his childhood with extended family in Montana. He learned to track before he learned to drive. His grandfather was a hunter. His great-grandfather was a hunter. The knowledge is not academic. It is inherited and then formalized. He has never given a media interview. He has no social media presence. His name does not appear in any published wildlife research, though his field data has contributed to at least 3 federally archived mammal surveys. He is, by every professional measure, the category of witness that investigators consider most reliable. Trained, experienced, institutionally embedded, and with nothing material to gain from speaking. That last point matters. He contacted us. We did not find him. A mutual contact, also unnamed, also from a fieldwork background, passed along a single message in the spring of 2023. It read, "He's ready to talk about the territory. He won't do it twice." The agency that contracted him for the 2019 survey has not responded to 3 separate requests for comment submitted over 14 months. Their silence is its own data point. The forest does not appear on any tourism map. That is not unusual for restricted federal land. What is unusual is that it does not appear by name in any Forest Service public documentation either. No trail designations, no management unit label, no fire history index entry. For a contiguous old-growth corridor of approximately 340,000 acres, that absence is not an oversight. Omissions at that scale are decisions. The zone straddles a jurisdictional boundary, part federal wilderness designation, part state-managed timber reserve, with tribal land bordering it on 2 sides. That overlap creates an administrative gap. Responsibility for the interior is, depending on who you ask, either shared or disputed. In practice, it means the zone's interior is effectively unmonitored. No permanent ranger presence, no remote sensor grid, no scheduled aerial survey. People do go in, hunters primarily. Some backcountry hikers following unmarked routes passed through informal outdoor communities online. The land is not legally closed to entry. There are simply no maintained access points and no infrastructure once you cross the bounding margin. Since 2009, 3 formal search and rescue operations have been conducted inside the zone. The first, in 2011, recovered nothing. A hunter from Minnesota, 44 years old, experienced. His vehicle was found at an informal trailhead. His camp was found intact, food still stored, sleeping bags still rolled out. He was not inside it. No remains were recovered. The second operation, 2015. a pair of backcountry hikers. One was found at the zone's eastern margin, disoriented, with no memory of the preceding 38 hours. The second was never located. The third operation, 2019, the same year as the tracker's contracted survey, was initiated after a GPS beacon activation in the zone's northern interior. Rescue teams reached the beacon's registered coordinates in 11 hours. They found the beacon. They found a boot, adult male, still laced, tongue still folded, no foot inside it, no blood, no disturbance to the surrounding ground. No further evidence was recovered. The case remains open.
Local Ojibwe communities who hold ancestral relationship to the land bordering the zone refer to the interior using a term that translates, imprecisely, as the place that counts. When asked what it counts, one community member, not the elder consulted later in this account, said simply, who enters, who leaves, the difference between those numbers. The contracted survey began September 8, 2019. The tracker entered alone, which was standard for his work. A solo operator produces less noise, less scent disruption, less behavioral interference with the animals being documented. He carried a 4-day pack, a Nikon D750 with a 400mm lens, a handheld GPS unit, a voice recorder, and a sidearm, a .44 Magnum revolver, standard loadout for remote large mammal work in bear country. Days 1 and 2 were unremarkable. He documented a resident elk herd, approximately 34 individuals, moving along a southwest drainage corridor, 2 mule deer, 1 black bear, a subadult male, 180 to 220 pounds estimated, working a berry slope at elevation, normal predator-prey distribution, normal sign, normal sound. He noted in his field journal that the zone felt, in his words, well occupied, active, balanced. Day 3 changed that. He was moving northeast along a dry creek bed at approximately 08:20 when the sound stopped. Not gradually, not the way a forest quiets when a predator moves through, which produces a rolling silence, sector by sector, as bird and insect life detects the threat and responds in sequence. This was immediate, total, as if a switch had been thrown across a quarter-mile radius simultaneously. He stopped moving. He documented the time, 08:23. He stood without moving for 6 minutes. Nothing resumed. No bird, no insect, no wind movement in the canopy, despite an ambient breeze he had been tracking by feel for 2 hours. Then the temperature dropped. He carries a digital thermometer as standard equipment, used for reading thermals when tracking.
Ambient temperature at 0820 had registered 54 degrees Fahrenheit. At 0829, it registered 44 degrees Fahrenheit. A 10-degree drop across 40 feet of linear distance in under 6 minutes, with no change in cloud cover and no water source proximate to the location. He photographed the thermometer display. The timestamp is embedded in the image metadata. 40 meters further along the creek bed, he found the track. Bipedal, left foot impression partially in soft creek silt, partially overlapping a gravel margin. The impression was deep enough to measure, 2.3 inches at the heel, 1.1 inches at the lateral toe margin. Track length, 18.5 inches. Stride length, measured to the next partial impression 10 feet further, 62 inches. He is precise about what he ruled out in the field, in sequence. Not bear, plantar morphology was wrong, no claw registration, arch structure inconsistent. Not human, stride interval in impression depth eliminated any human body mass. Depth to soil density calculation suggested a body weight of between 600 and 800 pounds for a bipedal gait. He photographed the track from 4 angles. That evening, reviewing the images on his camera display, he identified something he had not seen while crouching over the track in the field. In the upper left corner of the widest angle photograph, partially occluded by a creekside willow branch, was a second impression. Same morphology, different orientation. It was not in front of the first track. It was beside it. Whatever made the track he measured had not been alone. He did not report the tracks to the agency that night. He is clear about why. In 31 years of contracted fieldwork, he had learned one operational truth about institutional reporting. Anomalous findings without immediate institutional context get filed, flagged, and quietly buried. He wanted to understand what he had found before someone else decided what it meant. He made 2 phone calls instead.
The first was to an Ojibwe elder he had known for 19 years, a man in his late 70s, a former hunting guide, someone who had spent more cumulative time inside northern wilderness corridors than anyone the tracker had ever met professionally. He described the track dimensions, the silence event, the temperature drop, the location's approximate coordinates relative to the tribal land boundary. The elder did not ask clarifying questions. He said, "That's the boundary zone. We don't go past the second ridge after first frost." It was September. First frost in that corridor typically arrives between October 8th and October 19th. The tracker had entered on September 8th. He asked the elder what changes after first frost. The elder's response, reconstructed from the tracker's field journal notes made immediately after the call: activity increases near the boundary margin. The territorial range expands. Whatever operates in the interior moves closer to the edge in colder months. The elder's grandfather had documented this pattern. His grandfather's father had documented it before that. The oral record on the behavioral cycle in that specific zone spans at least 4 generations of hunters with direct observation experience. This was not folklore, it was field data transmitted without writing. The second call was to a Métis elder, a woman in her early 80s, a traditional knowledge keeper the tracker had been introduced to through tribal contacts in 2014. He described the same details. She asked one question before he finished. "Did you find a structure? Arranged wood?" He had not on the first entry. She told him what to look for. She told him what not to do. The prohibitions, as he recorded them verbatim, were 3. Do not enter after first frost. Do not carry blood-scented materials, harvested game, processed meat, open wounds. Do not call out or respond if you hear your name spoken in Saud and Treatlai. Then she said the sentence that recalibrated everything he thought he understood about what he was surveying. It does not chase what leaves. It chases what stays to look. He had stood over that track for 11 minutes. He had stayed to look. He completed the contracted survey on September 12th. He filed a standard report: elk herd population estimate, bear corridor notation, mule deer density per square mile. He did not include the track measurements. He did not include the temperature anomaly. He did not include the photographs. He listed the Northeast Creekbed sector as surveyed, no significant mammal activity documented. He drove home. He reviewed his photographs for 9 consecutive evenings. On October 14th, 32 days after his first entry, he went back in. No contract, no agency authorization, personal equipment only. He signed nothing and told no one his specific destination. He entered at 0540, 2 hours before civil twilight, using a headlamp on its lowest setting. He carried the same loadout as the first entry, with 2 additions: a second voice recorder as backup and a fixed-blade knife on his left hip. He does not explain the knife. He does not need to. The silence corridor was the first thing he documented. It had expanded. In September, the zone of total acoustic absence had measured roughly a quarter mile in diameter. On October 14th, he paced its margin along 3 approach vectors. The silence corridor now extended nearly half a mile in every direction from the creekbed's northeast bend. Same quality of absence: immediate, total, non-sequential. He noted the ambient temperature at the margin, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the corridor, 33 degrees Fahrenheit. An 8-degree differential, approximately 60 feet of transition zone. He moved deeper. At 0.3 miles inside the corridor, he found the trees: 3 Engelmann spruce, old growth, trunk diameter averaging 28 inches, each one marked with lateral scarring at between 9 and 11 feet of elevation.
The scarring pattern covered a horizontal span of 14 to 18 inches per tree. He examined the wound morphology closely. The cambium layer was displaced outward, not inward, meaning the force that produced the scarring had moved from inside the tree outward, which is inconsistent with bear claw contact, antler rub, or any mechanical abrasion from falling debris. The scarring had been made by something pressing against the bark from the outside with sufficient lateral force to displace living wood tissue outward, at 9 to 11 feet of elevation. He photographed each tree. He collected 2 cambium samples in a field evidence bag. 400 meters further northeast, he found the kill site, a mature bull elk. He estimated body weight at 680 to 720 pounds, based on skeletal frame dimensions. He could estimate because the carcass was largely intact. No significant soft tissue consumption. The animal had not been fed upon in any conventional predator pattern. What was missing was the spine. Not broken, not fragmented, removed. The vertebral column from C3 through L5 had been extracted from the carcass with enough precision that the surrounding musculature showed clean separation at the attachment points. No tool marks consistent with a blade, no crush pattern consistent with mechanical force. Clean separation, as if the column had been drawn out along its own axis. He noted one additional detail that he returns to twice during the testimony, unprompted.
There was no blood scatter in the surrounding area. A 700-pound elk does not die quietly. Predator kills produce arterial spray, pooling, drag trails, disturbance patterns across a wide radius. The ground around this carcass was undisturbed, leaf litter intact, no compression in the soil, no drag furrow. The animal had not been killed there. It had been placed there. He continued northeast. At 0.7 miles inside the corridor, he found the structure.
4 deadfall logs, each 10 to 14 feet in length, arranged in a deliberate rectangle. Dimensions, approximately 14 feet by 8 feet. The logs were Engelmann spruce, consistent with the surrounding forest, but their ends showed no root ball attachment. They had not fallen in place. They had been moved. The smallest log he estimated at 340 pounds. The largest, based on diameter and species density, at over 600 pounds. No storm pattern produces a rectangle. He stepped to the margin of the structure and looked inside. 1 boot print. Human. Adult male. Size 11 to 12, based on outline dimensions. No tread pattern. Either a smooth-soled boot or the tread had been compressed out of visibility by significant downward force. The print was centered inside the rectangle, equidistant from all 4 log walls. He crouched to photograph it. That was when he heard it. Not from a direction, from the air itself. A frequency below what he could cleanly resolve as sound, registered first as pressure against his sternum, then as a vibration in his back molars, then at its peak as something his auditory system processed as sound without being able to locate its source. He hit record on both voice recorders simultaneously. He did not stand up for 40 seconds. He stood slowly. Not from composure. He is direct about this in testimony. His legs had partially failed him, a physiological stress response he had experienced once before in 2007 when a grizzly bluff charged him from 11 feet. The body allocates resources during threat perception. Fine motor function in the lower extremities is not a priority. He braced against one of the structure's logs to stand fully upright. He did not look around immediately. He looked at his compass first. He does not explain why. He says it felt like the correct sequencing. Establish orientation before establishing threat location. The compass was functioning normally. He noted the heading, 022 degrees, northeast. He looked up at 022 degrees. It was standing at approximately 80 yards. He does not use the word creature in this portion of the testimony. He uses the word shape. He is deliberate about that distinction. What he could resolve visually was a vertical mass, partially occluded by 3 old-growth spruce trunks spaced between 8 and 12 feet apart. The shape occupied the gaps between those trunks without being fully visible through any single gap. He estimated its height using a reference he could verify, a spruce at its immediate left that he had passed on entry and recorded in his field notes as approximately 14 feet to its first significant branch fork. The shape's uppermost visible point cleared that branch fork, 8.5 to 9 feet. Stationary. He counted 4 minutes and 30 seconds of no movement. He timed it on his watch because timing it gave him something mechanical to do. The frequency in his chest continued at a consistent level, not escalating, not diminishing, steady, like a held note. Then the head moved, lateral rotation, left to right, slow and deliberate, not the rapid threat assessment movement of a bear or large cat, which is instinctive and fast. This was considered. It tracked from his left to his right across an arc of movement that suggested a head, a neck, and intentional muscular control of both. It was looking at him the way something looks at something it has already decided about. Then he saw the eyes. Reflection only. The headlamp's residual scatter at 80 yards was not sufficient for direct illumination, but the reflective return was visible. He describes it as amber white, not the green-gold tapetum lucidum reflection common to deer, elk, and bear, a color register he has seen thousands of times in 31 years of night fieldwork. This was different in hue and different in geometry. Rounder, more frontal. Both eyes visible simultaneously from a direct forward angle, which meant the orbital structure was front-facing. Predator eye placement.
The frequency intensified for approximately 8 seconds. Then it dropped completely. Silence inside the silence. He did not move. He states this was not a tactical decision. His body had made the decision independently. For 90 seconds, by his count, he experienced complete motor suspension. He was conscious. He was thinking. He was not moving. He describes the sensation as being assessed at a cellular level, not a metaphor he offers casually. He pauses after saying it. He does not elaborate. When motor function returned, he did not run. Running triggers pursuit response in every predator species he has ever studied. He turned at half speed. He began walking at a controlled pace toward his entry vector. Behind him, the frequency did not resume. Something moved instead. He heard it before he confirmed it. Lateral movement, parallel to his line of travel. Not behind him, beside him. 40 to 60 blank, moving at a pace that matched his exactly. When he slowed, it slowed. When he maintained, it maintained. He did not stop to verify this. He verified it by varying his pace 3 times across the first quarter mile and documenting the acoustic response each time. It matched him perfectly. In 31 years of wilderness fieldwork, he had seen this behavior pattern twice. Both times it was wolves, a pack using flank pressure to redirect ungulate movement away from cover and toward open ground where pursuit becomes efficient. The prey animal experiences it as choice. It feels like it is selecting its own route. It is not. It is being guided. He was being guided. He identified this within the first 400 meters and stopped walking. Standing still produced 10 seconds of continued lateral movement. Then that stopped too. He understood the tactical problem precisely. His entry route, the path back to the forest boundary, ran southwest. The lateral pressure was coming from his right, which was northwest.
Continued southwest movement would angle him progressively closer to the pressure source with every quarter mile. The route he was being guided toward curved southeast, away from his vehicle, deeper into the interior. He did not take that route. He turned northeast, directly into Nam Trail terrain, and moved at controlled speed into a section of the forest he had not surveyed. Deadfall heavy, slope gradient approximately 15 degrees, poor footing. He accepted all of that. Poor footing for him meant poor footing for anything following him through the same terrain. He crossed a creek drainage at a narrow point, 8 feet across, knee-deep, 38 degrees Fahrenheit water temperature. He noted the cold because it returned sensation to his lower legs that he had partially lost to stress response. He kept moving. The frequency returned. Not the chest pressure from the structure site, something higher in register, closer to audible. His second voice recorder was running in his chest pocket. He pressed his hand against it once to confirm the recording light was active. It was. The sound continued for 1.3 miles. He knows the distance precisely because he was running his GPS track the entire time, despite the earlier waypoint failure. The track log recorded continuously, even when individual saved points did not store. He reviewed the track log that evening. 1.3 miles of recorded movement, northeast through unmapped terrain, with the audio recorder capturing an unidentified frequency alongside his own footfall and breathing for the full duration. That audio was later reviewed by 2 independent sound engineers, one working in acoustic forensics for an insurance litigation firm, one a former U.S. Navy sonar technician. Neither could identify the frequency source.
The first described it as inconsistent with any biological or mechanical sound-producing mechanism in my professional experience. The second said only that the frequency range was real, recordable, and did not match any cataloged animal vocalization in the database he referenced. At 0.4 miles from the forest boundary, a clear-cut logging margin he had identified on aerial maps before entry, the sound stopped. Not gradually. The same switch-off quality as the silence corridor on entry. Immediate. Total. He did not stop moving. He covered the remaining 0.4 miles in under 6 minutes. He does not know his exact pace. He knows he did not run because he made a decision not to run and he held it. He counts that as the single most disciplined act of his professional life. He reached the clear-cut margin at 11:47. He stopped at the boundary line, the precise point where old-growth canopy gave way to open sky and logged ground. He stood there for 4 seconds. Then he turned. The tree line was still. No movement, no sound, no frequency. The forest behind him looked exactly as it had when he entered at 0540, dark at the interior, light-edged at the margin, ordinary in every visible respect. He stood there for 11 more seconds. On the 15th second, one tree moved, a spruce at the boundary margin, approximately 60 feet from where he was standing. It moved laterally, not a branch, not a crown shift from wind, the entire trunk, a slow, deliberate lean of 3 to 4 degrees away from his position and back, like something very large that had been pressed against it had shifted its weight.
The ambient wind at that moment was moving northwest to southeast. The tree moved northeast, against the wind. He turned around and walked to his vehicle without looking back again. He sat in the driver's seat for 22 minutes before he started the engine. His field journal entry for that period contains only 2 lines. The first, it stopped at the boundary.
It knew where the boundary was. The second, that is not instinct, that is knowledge. He drove 4 hours without stopping. He did not call the elders that night, he did not call his colleagues. He checked into a roadside motel outside a small Montana town, sat on the edge of the bed, and methodically reviewed everything he had returned with. He treated it the way he had been trained to treat field evidence. Inventory first, interpretation later. The photographs, 34 images captured across both entry days, 31 recovered intact on the memory card, 3 images from the second entry, all taken within a 12-minute window at the structure site, displayed only white exposure, uniform, no partial image data, no lens flare geometry. The camera's internal diagnostics showed no malfunction. The images immediately preceding and following the 3 blank frames were fully intact and correctly exposed. The cambium samples from the scarred spruce trees, intact, bagged, labeled. He later submitted them to a forestry contact at a state university under the description of unusual mechanical scarring, origin unknown. The contact's written response noted the displacement pattern was inconsistent with any standard biotic or abiotic scarring mechanism and recommended further analysis. He did not pursue further analysis. He still has the written response. The audio recordings. The primary recorder captured 22 minutes of standard ambient forest sound, followed by 4 minutes and 17 seconds of the unidentified frequency, followed by silence. The secondary recorder captured the same frequency continuously across 1.3 miles of movement through the northeast terrain sector. Both recordings are intact. Both have been reviewed by the 2 sound engineers, whose findings have already been noted in this account. The GPS track log, complete. 1.3-mile northeast deviation, clearly visible.
The waypoint from the first entry, the one that failed to save, does not appear anywhere in the device's internal memory, including the deleted file cache. In the 3 weeks following the second entry, he lost 11 pounds. He did not return to contracted fieldwork for 6 months. He attributes neither to psychological trauma. He attributes the weight loss to disrupted sleep. He attributes the work absence to a practical recalibration of his professional risk threshold. He is precise about what he now knows as distinct from what he suspects. He knows something occupies that territory with deliberate awareness of its boundaries. He knows it monitors entry. He knows it makes decisions about what it does with what it finds inside those boundaries. He uses the word knows each time, not believes, not suspects, knows. He called the Ojibwe elder 3 days after returning. He reported what he had found: the structure, the kill site, the spine removal, the frequency, the boundary behavior. He delivered it the way he delivers all field reports, sequentially, without editorializing, without pause for effect. The elder was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I know. It came to the edge of our land 3 nights after you left. It stood at the boundary marker. It stood there until morning." The tracker does not speak for several seconds at this point in the testimony. The recorder captures his breathing, nothing else. When he continues, his voice is identical in cadence and register to every preceding minute of this account. That consistency is itself a data point. He states that in the 4 years since October 2019, he has spoken privately with 3 other contracted trackers, all operating in geographically separate wilderness zones across the northern United States. Different territories, different tribal land borders, different agencies. All 3 have had contact experiences consistent with what he documented. None have filed official reports.
All 3 have permanently ceased entry into their respective zones. He is asked, at the close of the interview, whether he believes the public should be warned about the territory. He says the question contains a false assumption. The warning already exists, he says. It's been there for generations. In the oral record, in the land boundary agreements, in the names those communities gave that forest. He pauses. The problem is not the absence of a warning. The problem is who decided it didn't count.
The forest he entered in September and October of 2019 remains open to the public. No restricted access designation, no posted signage at the informal trailhead where his vehicle was parked on both entry dates. The boot recovered by search and rescue in that same zone, in that same year, has not been publicly connected to any missing persons case. The file is still open.